Hello there, and welcome. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time it might be as you settled in to listen, I'd be happy to know where you're watching from. I hope this story can bring you a measure of peace. Our journey tonight begins not with a sudden awakening, but with a slow, gentle resurfacing. For the Immortal King, consciousness does not arrive with a jolt or the frantic ringing of an alarm. It is a slow tide coming in over a vast, familiar shore. He has, after all, had considerable practice. Snoozing for an entire season is an art form he perfected sometime in the 7th Age, though he finds it plays havoc with the court's schedule. The first sensation is always the same: the weight. It is the gentle pressure of the ancient silk sheets, a fabric so fine and old it feels less like cloth and more like cool, liquid moonlight pooled upon his body. They were a gift from an empress in a land whose name is now only found on crumbling maps. He remembers she was terribly proud of the silkworms, a special breed she claimed were descended from the moths of the moon. He supposes they were. The second sensation is the chill. It is not a harsh or unpleasant cold, but the deep, patient, persistent chill that lives in the very bones of the castle, a cold that has seeped into the stone over millennia. It is the kind of cold that has a history, a quiet reminder that the fortress was here long before him, and will likely be here long after. But then he will be here long after too, so it's a rather pointless competition. This gentle tide of awareness brings with it no urgency, no list of tasks for the day. His first thoughts are not of statecraft or duty, but of simple, weary recognition. Ah, he thinks, without truly thinking it, this room. Again. As his eyes adjust, they do not need to rove about to take in their surroundings. He knows every detail with a familiarity so profound it has become part of him. The great four-poster bed is carved from the heartwood of a single petrified lightning tree felled thousands of years ago. It is terribly uncomfortable, designed more for permanence than for rest, but its lumps and knots are old friends. To his left hangs the tapestry. It depicts a great hunt for a mythical white stag, a masterpiece of weaving completed by Queen Eleonora, a fiery woman who has been dust and memory for 800 years. He looks at it and feels a faint, wry smile touch his lips. He remembers the actual hunt. It was a rather clumsy affair involving a slippery, moss-covered rock and a sprained royal ankle. The stag was disappointingly average. Eleonora, he recalls, always had a flair for dramatic improvement. The room is a fortress against time, a museum of himself, where nothing is ever moved, nothing is ever replaced. The air is still, holding the faint, dry scent of ancient wood, old stone, and dust that is itself an artifact. Everything is precisely as it has been for centuries, a perfect, unchanging sanctuary. But there is one thing that is new, one thing that moves. It is a thin, sharp sliver of sunlight, a blade of pale gold that has just begun its slow, silent journey across the stone floor. This is his 1000th sunrise, or perhaps his 10,000th. He stopped counting long ago, around the time he realized the sun was not rising to greet him, but was simply performing a celestial chore, punching a time clock in the sky. This sliver of light is the only visitor that ever enters unannounced. It creeps across the floor, illuminating the faded colors of an old rug, and it serves as the day's only true beginning. It is the single, undeniable proof that outside this room, outside this castle, a world continues to turn, to age and to decay, while he and his chamber remain stubbornly, relentlessly the same. The king rises from the bed, not with the stiff groan of an old man, nor the energetic spring of a young one. His movements are a study in practiced economy, as fluid and unhurried as water flowing over smooth stone. Each motion has been refined over centuries, stripped of any wasted effort, until it is a perfect, silent ballet of conservation. There is no haste in him. Haste is the luxury of the mortal, a frantic race against a ticking clock he no longer hears. He has all the time in the world, and it has taught him the profound efficiency of moving slowly. He stands for a moment, letting the cold stone floor greet the soles of his feet, another small, unchanging ritual to begin the day. As if summoned by his silent, vertical presence, the chamber door opens and two servants enter. They are young, impossibly young. Their faces are fresh, earnest, and completely unfamiliar to him. He sees in the curve of one boy's jaw a faint echo of his great-great-great-grandfather, a man who served as the king's valet during the Ashen Plague, and was, if he recalls correctly, a terrible cheat at cards. The girl, with her startlingly blue eyes, reminds him of a lineage of servants stretching back to the Fourth Age, a family known for their quiet competence and a shared hereditary allergy to peaches. He does not know their names. He stopped learning their names 3 centuries ago. It was a small act of self-preservation, a way to keep the constant churning river of humanity at a manageable distance. To learn a name is to create a connection, and every connection is a future loss, a tiny crack in the dam of his composure. So he simply nods, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement, and they move to assist him, their hands deft and their silence reverent. They are ghosts in his periphery, performing a duty their ancestors performed before them, a sacred, inherited task passed down like a family heirloom. The ritual of dressing is not about vanity. It is about armor. Not the physical armor of steel plate, but the psychological armor of routine. The servants bring forth his clothes, which are laid out in a precise, unvarying order. The garments are not lavish or ostentatious. There are no garish jewels or flamboyant silks. The king's style is one of timeless, understated permanence, a fashion he adopted around the time of the Skyfall and saw no particular reason to update. The tunic they slip over his head is woven from a silvery thread, a strange, weightless metal that never tarnishes and feels cool against the skin. It was made for him by the last of the starlight weavers, a reclusive people who have since vanished from the world, leaving behind only legends and this single perfect garment. The breeches are a deep, soft black made from a material that seems to drink the light, and his boots are crafted from the supple, unblemished hide of a shadow wyvern. They have never needed to be repaired or replaced. They fit his feet as perfectly today as they did on the day a long-dead artisan presented them to him with trembling hands 500 years ago. Each piece of clothing is a memory, an artifact. As the servants fasten the clasps and tighten the belt, he is not merely getting dressed. He is girding himself for the day. This routine, this sequence of familiar actions is his anchor. In the vast, featureless ocean of eternity, where one year bleeds into the next without distinction, these small, unchanging rituals are the only landmarks. They are the buoys that mark the passage of a single day, giving shape and structure to the formless void of his endless life. It is a quiet, desperate battle against the madness of infinity, fought every morning with a silver tunic and a pair of wyvern hide boots. Once dressed, the king dismisses the servants with another small nod and proceeds alone to a small, private antechamber for his first meal. He does not eat in the great hall. To do so would mean dining with his council, his guards, his courtiers, a shifting cast of mortal faces. Their lively chatter a stark reminder of the brevity of their lives and the cavernous emptiness of his own. He tried it for a few centuries. He found the constant need to feign interest in fleeting court gossip, and to remember which councilman was feuding with which general to be utterly exhausting. Solitude, he discovered, is far more peaceful. The chamber is sparse, containing only a small stone table and a single chair. The meal is already waiting for him, and it is as simple and unchanging as his attire. There is a small loaf of dark, dense bread, a wedge of soft white cheese, and a goblet of cool, clear water. This is not the meal of a king. It is the meal of a hermit. But each element is, to him, a universe of memory. He breaks a piece of the bread. The strain of wheat it is made from is one he himself cultivated in the southern provinces 400 years ago, a hardy, drought-resistant grain that saved the kingdom from a great famine. The taste is earthy and familiar, the taste of a long-solved problem. He cuts a slice of the cheese. It is creamy and tangy, made from a recipe he once taught to a young milkmaid named Ilara, a girl with a brilliant smile and a talent for cheesemaking. Her cheeses became legendary throughout the realm. Kings and queens from other lands sent envoys to procure them. Ilara herself, of course, grew old and died, as did her children and her children's children. The recipe was passed down, but the smile was lost to time. He eats slowly, deliberately. The food holds no pleasure for him in the conventional sense. His palate, after thousands of years, is weary. He has tasted every delicacy, every exotic fruit, every rare vintage the world has ever produced. Flavors no longer surprise him. Instead, eating is an act of communion with his own past. Each bite is a memory. The bread is a memory of famine. The cheese is a memory of a smile. The water is a memory of 1,000 parched throats. He is not just consuming food, he is consuming his own history, ingesting the ghosts of his long, long life. The meal is a silent, solitary affair, a final moment of quiet reflection before he must face the day and its endless, repeating demands. It is the last piece of his armor, the final reinforcement of the quiet, lonely sanctuary of his routine. And when he is finished, he rises from the table, leaving a few crumbs behind, and prepares to walk the long, echoing halls to his throne. Stepping out from his private chambers, the king begins his daily pilgrimage to the throne room. This is not a mere commute from one part of the castle to another. For him, this walk is a journey through time, a solitary procession through the museum of his own long and crowded past. The great hall he enters is vast and silent, a canyon of stone and shadow. The high vaulted ceilings drink the morning light, leaving the space in a state of perpetual, solemn twilight. His footsteps, clad in the silent wyvern hide, make no sound on the polished stone floor. The only sound is the one he imagines, the echo of 1,000 other footsteps, the ghostly shuffle of courtiers, the hurried clatter of messengers, the heavy tread of armored guards from ages long past. To any other observer, the hall is empty. To the king, it is impossibly crowded. His path takes him down the center of the hall, a space flanked on either side by silent, watching figures. They are the portraits, dozens of them hanging in ornate, gilded frames. These are not the portraits of his ancestors. He has no ancestors left that anyone, even he, can remember. These are the faces of his life. They are his descendants, his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, a sprawling, tangled family tree whose every branch he has seen wither and fall. He passes the portrait of his firstborn son, a stern-faced man with the king's own eyes, who ruled as Prince Regent for 50 years and died of old age, his father holding his withered hand. Beside him hangs a portrait of a granddaughter, Lyra, a beautiful and willful young woman who, in a fit of pique, eloped with a stable hand 2 centuries ago and was never seen again. He wonders sometimes if her line continues somewhere out in the world, a secret river of his blood flowing through the veins of common folk. He walks on, past the faces of his advisors, his chancellors, his spy masters, men and women of brilliant, fleeting genius, their minds like supernovas, burning brightly for a few decades before collapsing into darkness. He remembers their passionate arguments in the council chamber, their clever strategies, their terrible miscalculations. He sees a portrait of Master Elian, a spy master from the 9th Age, who was so cunning he managed to uncover a plot against the throne orchestrated by the king himself, a test of loyalty Elian passed with flying colors, much to the king's secret amusement. Then are the friends. This section of the hall is sparser. He learned long ago that friendship with the mortal is a cruel and painful indulgence, a bond that is always severed by the relentless blade of time. But in his younger, more foolish centuries, he tried. He pauses before the portrait of a smiling, fiery-haired young man in the uniform of a general. This was Calen. He was not a brilliant strategist or a cunning politician. He was just a brave, loud, and incredibly loyal young man who loved bad jokes and strong ale. The king remembers Calen's ridiculous, booming laugh echoing through these very halls. He remembers the boy's unshakable belief that the king could do no wrong. The portrait shows him in his moment of triumph, after the victory at the siege of the Blackwater Pass. The king remembers the day 6 centuries ago when Calen died in that same pass, leading a foolish, heroic, and entirely unnecessary charge against an enemy he had already outmaneuvered. The artist has captured his smile, but the king can still see the naivety in his eyes, the tragic, misplaced faith of a young man who thought he was as immortal as his king. These are not works of art to him. They are tombstones, each frame a monument to a loss, each painted face a ghost that walks beside him. He continues his slow, silent walk. He runs a hand along the cool, smooth surface of a marble railing that lines a grand staircase. The stone has been polished to a glassy sheen, not by any servant's cloth, but by the casual touch of 10 generations of hands. He can almost feel the phantom pressure of them now, the small, sticky hand of a princess who loved to slide down this banister, the firm, confident grip of a chancellor on his way to a council meeting, the trembling, frail touch of an old queen taking these stairs for the last time. For the king, nothing is ever just what it is. Every object in this castle is layered with 1,000 other meanings, 1,000 other memories. He looks at a grand arched window and sees not just the courtyard outside, but he also sees the same window during the great storm of the year of screaming winds, its glass bowed inwards, threatening to shatter. He glances at a faded patch on a tapestry and remembers the day a clumsy serving boy, the ancestor of the boy who dressed him this very morning, spilled a jug of dark wine, the stain a permanent mark of a fleeting moment of panic. The weight of this history is immense, a physical pressure on his soul. It is the curse of the immortal, to live in a world where the past is as real and as present as the ground beneath your feet. The hall is a palimpsest, a document on which countless lives have been written and erased. But he is the only one who can still read the faded, ghostly script beneath. He sees the phantoms of his own past selves walking these halls beside him. He sees the young, arrogant king who first sat the throne, so sure of his own power. He sees the grieving, broken king who had just buried his first wife. He sees the weary, cynical king who had seen one too many wars. They are all here, all part of the silent, spectral crowd that accompanies him on his daily walk. By the time he reaches the great bronze-bound doors of the throne room, he is not just a king arriving to perform his duties. He is a walking archive, a living library of sorrow and memory. He pauses for a moment, his hand on the cold bronze of the door handle. He takes a slow, deep breath, a small ritual to shore up his defenses, to push the ghosts back into their frames, and to prepare himself for the present. He straightens his back, assumes the ageless, placid mask of the Immortal King, and pushes the door open. It is time for the day to begin. Again. The great bronze doors swing inward with a low, groaning sound, a sound of immense weight and age. The king steps through, and the silence of the hall behind him is replaced by a silence of a different kind. This is the silence of the throne room. The chamber is immense, a cavernous space designed to inspire awe and diminish all who enter. The ceilings soar into a darkness so complete that it seems to swallow the light from the high, slit-like windows. The air is still and cold, carrying the faint, clean scent of polished stone and old, cold iron. The vast, empty space is unnerving, a deliberate architectural choice to make any petitioner feel small and insignificant. The room is not entirely empty, however. Lining the walls at precise, unvarying intervals are the Silent Guard. They are an elite cadre of warriors, clad head to toe in black, featureless armor, their faces hidden behind visors that betray no hint of the human within. They stand as statues, their halberds held perfectly perpendicular to the floor. They do not blink. They do not shift their weight. They are trained to be a part of the room's architecture, living gargoyles whose only purpose is to bear silent, unmoving witness. The king barely registers their presence. They are a constant, as much a part of the room as the stone pillars that support the roof. He knows that beneath the helmets are young, mortal men, their hearts beating, their minds wandering. But from the outside, they are simply fixtures, another element in the room's grand, oppressive design. His gaze is fixed on the far end of the room, on the raised dais where his destination awaits, the throne. It is not the sort of throne one reads about in stories. There is no glittering gold, no sparkling gemstones, no plush velvet cushions. It is a brutal, elemental thing, a statement of permanence rather than luxury. It was carved, so the legends say, from the heart of a fallen star, a single, massive piece of polished black obsidian. It is a solid, unyielding block of a seat, its surface as dark and cold as a winter's night. The armrests are smooth and worn, the back high and severe. It is a throne that does not offer comfort. It demands endurance. It is less a piece of furniture and more a geological feature, a small, personal mountain he must climb every day. The king begins the long walk across the empty expanse of the throne room. It is a lonely walk, a journey of 100 paces that feels like a mile. With each step, he can feel the weight of the room's silence pressing in on him, the unseen gazes of the silent guard following his progress. He reaches the dais. There are 5 steps, shallow and wide. He places his foot on the first step. The act of ascending is a ritual he has performed countless times, but it has never lost its significance. This is not an ascent born of pride or ambition. He is not climbing to a position of glory. He is climbing to his post, assuming his duty. Each step is a deliberate, conscious acceptance of the burden he carries. Step 1, the acceptance of solitude. Step 2, the acceptance of endless duty. Step 3, the acceptance of perpetual loss. Step 4, the acceptance of the past. Step 5, the acceptance of the future. It is a slow, meditative climb, a quiet reaffirmation of his role in the world. He reaches the top and turns, standing for a moment before the obsidian throne. As he stands there, a figure emerges from the shadows to the side of the dais. It is the keeper of the regalia, another hereditary position held by a single, quiet family. This servant carries no scepter, no orb. He carries only a single, flat, crimson velvet pillow. And resting upon that pillow is the crown. Like the throne, the crown is a thing of stark, brutal simplicity. It is not a grand, jewel-encrusted diadem. It is a simple, unadorned circlet of a strange, grayish metal that does not seem to reflect the light. No one knows what the metal is or who forged it. It was ancient when the kingdom was young. It is cool to the touch and surprisingly light. The keeper of the regalia bows low, holding the pillow out to the king. The king reaches out and takes the crown in his own hands. For a moment, he simply holds it, looking at its plain, circular form. It is a perfect, unbroken loop, a symbol of the very eternity that is his cage. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he raises the circlet and places it upon his head. The moment the cool metal touches his brow, he feels the weight. It is not the physical weight of the crown itself, for that is negligible. It is a weight that is metaphysical, a crushing spiritual burden that settles upon his soul. In that single instant, he feels the accumulated weight of the millennia. He feels the weight of every decision he has ever made, from the waging of wars that shaped continents to the simple signing of a decree that altered the life of a single farmer. He feels the weight of every life he has ever been responsible for, every soldier sent to die, every subject who has looked to him for protection. He feels the weight of every secret he has ever kept, every truth he has had to conceal for the good of the realm. And most of all, he feels the weight of every sorrow he has ever endured, every wife, child, and friend he has outlived and mourned. It is the weight of history itself, 1,000 years of joy and pain, of triumph and tragedy, all condensed into the single, simple act of wearing this plain metal band. He closes his eyes for a moment, his face a calm, placid mask that betrays none of the immense pressure he feels. He takes a single, slow, deep breath, a small, silent act of centering himself, of steadying his soul against the crushing burden. Then he opens his eyes, his gaze clear and focused. He turns and, with a final, weary sigh that is seen by no one, he sits down upon the cold, unyielding obsidian of his throne. The weight settles. The day has officially begun. The Immortal King is in his place. For a long moment, the king sits alone in the vast, silent throne room, the sole occupant of the cold obsidian throne. He is a still point in a still world, a study in absolute, motionless sovereignty. Then a low, resonant boom echoes through the chamber as the herald strikes the bronze doors with his ceremonial staff. The sound signals the beginning of the day's first audience. The great doors swing open, and a small group of figures are ushered into the immense space. They are a delegation of farmers from a remote northern province, a place of high mountains and short, unpredictable growing seasons. They are dressed in simple, homespun wool, their faces weathered and chiseled by a lifetime of wind and hard work. As they begin the long walk towards the throne, they look comically small and out of place in the grand, oppressive chamber. They walk with a hesitant, shuffling gait, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe, clearly intimidated by the scale of the room and the silent, black-clad guards who line the walls. They clutch their shapeless wool caps in their calloused, work-worn hands, their knuckles white. The king watches their slow approach, his expression a mask of gentle, kingly compassion. He sees their faces, and in them he sees a quality that is almost painful for him to witness. It is hope. It is a raw, desperate, and beautiful hope. The belief that this journey, this audience with their ageless and legendary king, will solve their problems. He has seen this exact expression on the faces of their ancestors for 1,000 years, and it never fails to cause a faint, sorrowful ache in his ancient heart. They reach the foot of the dais, and as one fall to their knees, bowing their heads to the stone floor. One of them, clearly the eldest and their chosen spokesman, remains on his knees but lifts his head to speak. His voice is rough and unaccustomed to the acoustics of such a large room, but it is steady and filled with a simple, earnest dignity. He begins his petition. He speaks of the soil, the lifeblood of his people. He speaks of a strange, creeping blight, a rust-colored mold that is withering the leaves of their barley crops before the grain can ripen. He speaks of the rains, which have come too early and too hard this season, turning their fields into a cold, muddy soup. He speaks of the thinning herds, the threat of a long and hungry winter. And finally, with his voice trembling slightly with the audacity of his request, he asks for a deferment of the royal tax, a small measure of relief that would allow them to purchase seed for the next planting and to survive the lean months ahead. The king listens, his head tilted slightly, his gaze fixed on the farmer's face. He listens with an infinite, unfeigned patience. His expression is one of deep, compassionate understanding. But as he listens to the words, he is also listening to the echoes. For he has heard this exact speech before, not from this man, but from his father, and his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, stretching back through a dozen generations. The details change, of course. Sometimes the blight is a black rot instead of a rust-colored mold. Sometimes it is a plague of locusts instead of too much rain. Sometimes the failing crop is oats instead of barley. But the core of the petition, the desperate struggle against the whims of nature, is always, always the same. He has seen this cycle repeat itself with the same predictable rhythm as the turning of the seasons. Blights come and go. Famines wax and wane. He has learned that the soil, like the people who work it, has its own cycles of sickness and health. This crisis, which feels so unique and cataclysmic to these earnest, frightened men, is to the king just another Tuesday. He lets the silence hang in the air for a moment after the farmer has finished, a deliberate pause that gives his words the appropriate weight. The farmers wait, their heads bowed, their hope and fear hanging thick in the air between them. Then the king speaks. His voice is calm and quiet, yet it carries effortlessly to the furthest corners of the throne room. "Rise, good men of the north," he says, his tone gentle. "Your king has heard you." The farmers struggle to their feet, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. The king then turns his head slightly towards a scribe seated near the dais, a young man with an ink-stained quill held at the ready. Without consulting any notes, without a moment's hesitation, he begins to dictate his decree. His solution is, as always, both practical and wise, born of centuries of experience with this exact problem. He grants them a 2-year deferment on their taxes. He orders the royal granaries in the nearest provincial capital to release a shipment of blight-resistant seed corn, a strain he personally developed 2 centuries prior after a particularly nasty bout of wheat rust. He dictates a brief, practical set of instructions on crop rotation and soil drainage techniques, simple but effective methods that his agricultural advisors have been trying, with limited success, to teach the stubborn northern farmers for generations. Finally, he commands the captain of the Silent Guard to dispatch a small contingent to their province, not to enforce the law, but to assist in the digging of new drainage ditches, a subtle and effective use of his standing army. The scribe's quill scratches furiously across the parchment, capturing the king's quiet, measured words. The farmers listen, their expressions transforming from hope to stunned, tearful gratitude. Their prayers have been answered. Their legendary, godlike king, in his infinite wisdom, has seen their plight and delivered them. They fall to their knees once more, stammering their thanks, their voices thick with emotion. The king gives a small, dismissive wave of his hand. "Go in peace," he says. "Serve the kingdom by serving your soil." He watches as they are led from the throne room, their steps now lighter, their shoulders straighter, their faces shining with a renewed faith in their world. He watches them go, and a profound weariness settles over him. To them, he is a benevolent deity, a wise and omniscient ruler who has saved them from a unique and terrible crisis. To himself, he is an actor in a play that never ends, reciting his lines with a practiced, hollow perfection. He has played this part 1,000 times, and he knows he will play it 1,000 times more. The farmers will go home, and for a generation they will prosper. They will tell their children the story of their audience with the living God. And then, in 50 years or 70, a new blight will appear. The climate will shift slightly, and their grandchildren will make the long, arduous journey to this same throne room, their faces filled with the same desperate hope to deliver the same speech. The cycle is as relentless and as unbreakable as the turning of the earth itself. And he, the Immortal King, is its silent, weary, unchanging. After the humble farmers have departed, their simple, earthy concerns fading with them, the throne room is once again prepared for the next audience. The shift in tone is immediate and palpable. The herald's staff booms against the bronze doors with a sharper, more arrogant sound. And when they swing open, they admit a completely different breed of petitioner. This is the delegation of the guild masters of the capital city. They are a stark contrast to the farmers who preceded them. They are a group of a dozen or so men and women, dressed not in practical wool, but in the finest clothes their respective trades can produce. The master of the Weavers' Guild is draped in a shimmering cloak of dyed silk. The master of the Tanners' Guild is shod in boots of exquisite, supple leather. And the master of the Jewelers' Guild has fingers that sparkle with a dozen ostentatious rings. They walk not with a shuffle, but with a confident, purposeful stride, their heads held high. Their faces are not weathered by the sun, but are pale and shrewd, their eyes sharp and calculating. They do not seem intimidated by the vastness of the throne room. They seem to view it as a stage worthy of their presence. They approach the dais and offer a bow that is respectful but not subservient, a gesture of protocol rather than genuine awe. The king watches them, his expression as placid and unreadable as ever. He knows these types well. They are the engines of the city's commerce, the architects of its prosperity, and the source of its most convoluted and tiresome disputes. Their spokesman, a large, florid man named Master Valerius, who heads the powerful Merchants' Guild, steps forward. Unlike the farmer, he does not speak of survival. He speaks of profit. He launches into a long, passionate, and incredibly detailed speech, a torrent of words concerning trade routes, tariffs, and guild jurisdictions. He argues for the imposition of a heavy tax on imported silks from the southern kingdoms, a measure designed to protect the local Weavers' Guild. He lobbies for royal funding to chart a new, more direct sea route to the Spice Islands, a venture that promises immense wealth for his own guild. He wades into a bitter, long-running dispute between the Weavers' Guild and the Tailors' Guild over who has the right to sell finished garments, a conflict that has, for months, filled the city's courts with angry, well-dressed litigants. The other guild masters murmur their assent, occasionally adding their own 2 cents, their arguments sharp, their voices filled with the fierce, competitive fire of commerce. They speak of their concerns as if they are the most important issues in the history of the world, as if the fate of the entire kingdom rests upon the outcome of these petty squabbles. The king listens with that same infinite, maddening patience. He hears their words, but he also hears the echoes of 1,000 similar arguments. He remembers a time 700 years ago when the most powerful guild in the city was the Candlemakers. They were a proud, wealthy, and politically influential group who held a complete monopoly on indoor illumination. They had stood in this very spot, their faces filled with the same self-important fervor, and argued passionately for a royal decree banning the use of cheap, smelly palo lamps in the city's taverns. The king had granted their request, and for a generation they had prospered. Then, a clever prospector had discovered the luminous crystals in the deep caves to the east. Within a decade, the soft, permanent glow of crystal light filled every home and street in the city. The candle-making industry collapsed almost overnight. The once mighty Candlemakers' Guild faded into obscurity. Its grand guild hall eventually sold to the then-fledgling Glassblowers' Guild, who needed the space to craft the crystal lamps. The king has seen this cycle repeat itself endlessly. He has seen the rise and fall of the Scribes' Guild, made obsolete by the invention of the printing press. He has seen the decline of the Blacksmiths' Guild as new, more easily workable alloys were discovered. He has seen the Coopers' Guild, once essential for making barrels, nearly wiped out by the popularization of waterproof clay amphorae. Each guild, in its heyday, believed its own importance to be permanent, its craft essential and timeless. And each one, in turn, was swept away by the relentless, invisible tide of progress and changing tastes. He looks at the proud, passionate faces of the Weavers' Guild and the Tailors' Guild, and he knows that, in a century or two, their bitter dispute will be a forgotten footnote in the city's history. Perhaps a new type of fabric will be invented, something that requires neither weaving nor tailoring. Perhaps the very concept of clothing will change. He has seen stranger things. Their passionate, short-sighted arguments are, to him, like the bickering of children fighting over a toy that will be broken and discarded by tomorrow. He waits for them to finish, for their torrent of words to finally run dry. Then he raises a single calm hand, and the room falls silent. He addresses their points one by one, his voice quiet but firm. He does not grant the tariff on imported silks. He knows from long experience that protectionism, while temporarily beneficial to a single guild, ultimately stifles innovation and raises prices for everyone. Instead, he offers the Weavers' Guild a royal subsidy to invest in new, more efficient looms, a subtle nudge to compete rather than hide. He agrees to partially fund the expedition for a new sea route, but makes it a joint venture, forcing the bickering guilds to cooperate for a share of the profits. As for the dispute between the weavers and the tailors, he proposes a simple, elegant compromise, a redrawing of their charters so clear and logical that both sides are momentarily stunned into silence, unable to find fault with it. His judgments are wise, his logic unassailable. He is not just ruling, he is curating the kingdom's economy, making tiny, almost invisible adjustments based on patterns he has observed over centuries. He is a gardener, pruning a branch here, reinforcing a stem there, all to ensure the long-term health of the entire plant. The guild masters are placated. Each of them feels they have won a small victory. They offer their thanks, their pride slightly tempered by the unnerving ease with which the king has untangled their complex knots. They bow and depart, already calculating how to turn the king's new decrees to their personal advantage. The king watches them go, knowing the truth. He has not solved their problems. He has merely postponed the inevitable. He has bought the weavers a few more decades. He has forced the merchants into a temporary, grudging alliance. But the tide of change will not be stopped. New inventions will appear, new kingdoms will rise, and the delicate ecosystem of their commerce will shift and transform. All he has done is make the transition slightly less painful. He is not a builder of dams. He is merely a tender of riverbanks, gently guiding a current he knows he can never hope to control. And a quiet, weary thought drifts through his mind. He rather misses the candle makers. They were, at least, a more straightforward bunch. With the audiences concluded for the morning, the king proceeds to the next phase of his daily routine, a task that requires a different kind of patience altogether. He moves from the vast, empty throne room to a smaller, more intimate chamber. This is the council room. The air here is warmer, thick with the scent of old paper, beeswax, and the faint, intellectual aroma of stressed, overachieving minds. Seated around a large, circular table carved from a single piece of dark, polished oak are the members of his royal council. This is not a room of sycophants or yes-men. The king learned long ago that flattery is a useless commodity. This council is composed of the best and brightest minds of the current generation, the absolute pinnacle of the kingdom's talent. At the head of the table sits General Eris, a military genius whose tactical brilliance has already become the stuff of legend. He is a man in his 50s, his face a roadmap of old battle scars, his eyes sharp and focused. Beside him is Lyra, the spy master, a woman barely 30 years old, with a quiet, unassuming demeanor that conceals a mind as sharp and intricate as a spider's web. Opposite them is a high theologian named Corin, a man whose understanding of doctrine and history is unparalleled. And beside him, the Master of Coin, a shrewd woman who can track the flow of gold through the kingdom with an almost supernatural clarity. They are brilliant. They are dedicated. They are the pillars of the realm. And to the king, as he takes his seat among them, they are children. He looks at their faces, alive with passion and fierce intelligence, and he sees fire. They burn with a bright, intense, and terribly fleeting flame. Their lives, even the longest of them, are a brief, frantic spark in the long, dark night of his own existence. They see the world in terms of years, perhaps decades. Their plans and ambitions are bounded by the short, brutal horizon of their own mortality. He sees the world in terms of centuries and millennia. It is this fundamental, unbridgeable gap in perspective that defines every council meeting. The topic of discussion today is a border dispute with the neighboring kingdom of Eldoria to the west. General Eris unrolls a large, detailed map across the table, his finger jabbing at a contested region, a sliver of forested highlands known as the Griffin's Tooth. He speaks with military precision, outlining recent Eldorian troop movements, analyzing supply lines, and proposing a preemptive strike to secure their claim on the territory. His arguments are sound, his logic impeccable. The spymaster, Lyra, follows, her voice soft, but her words sharp. She presents intelligence gathered by her network of agents, reports of political instability within the Eldorian court, whispers of a succession crisis that could be exploited to their advantage. The theologian then chimes in, citing ancient texts and historical precedents to justify their kingdom's claim to the land, a claim based on a treaty signed 400 years ago. The king listens to all of this with his customary placid attention. He hears their brilliant, passionate, and entirely short-sighted debate, and his mind drifts. He remembers Eldoria. He remembers when it wasn't a kingdom at all, but a loose confederation of nomadic horse-riding tribes who worshipped the wind and had a particular fondness for fermented mare's milk. He remembers the great chieftain Vorlag, a man with a wild red beard and a laugh like thunder, who united the tribes and first called himself king. The king had liked Vorlag. He was an honest, if occasionally drunk, barbarian. The king had liked Vorlag. He was an honest, if occasionally drunk, barbarian. The king also remembers the treaty the theologian is citing with such authority. He should. He wrote it. He remembers the long, difficult negotiations conducted in a smoky yurt that finally established the borders between his own ancient settled kingdom and Vorlag's new, volatile one. He remembers the specific clause about the Gryphon's tooth, an ambiguous piece of wording he himself had crafted to give both sides a sense of victory while leaving room for future interpretation. He also remembers something that is not written in any treaty, something that has been lost to the short, flickering memory of mortal history. He remembers the rainfall patterns in that region. He knows that the Gryphon's tooth is prone to a cyclical 70-year drought, a drought that, according to his own internal, infallible calendar, is due to begin within the next 2 years. An army stationed in that region, cut off from the rain-fed rivers, would be a thirsty, weakened army, easily surrounded and starved into submission. A preemptive strike, as the brilliant General Eris suggests, would be a catastrophic blunder. But he cannot simply state this. He cannot say, "I know this because I am immortal, and I have seen this happen 3 times before." To reveal the true depth of his knowledge would shatter their minds, turn him from a wise king into an unknowable, terrifying demigod. It would break the delicate illusion that they are his trusted advisors and not simply his intellectual playthings. So, he employs a different strategy, one he has perfected over centuries. He does not command, he guides. He waits for a pause in their debate and then speaks, his voice quiet and thoughtful. "An interesting analysis, General," he says, nodding at Eris. "But tell me, have we considered the logistical challenges? That is a dry and difficult land. I recall from old campaign journals that the rivers in that region can be unreliable." He then turns his calm gaze to the spymaster. "Lyra, you mentioned your grandfather was a spymaster in his day. A fine man. I recall he faced a similar border issue, though further to the south. His private journals are in the royal archives. They might prove illuminating." He was very meticulous about noting weather patterns in his reports. He lets these small, gentle questions hang in the air. He has planted a seed of doubt in the general's mind, not by questioning his strategy, but by questioning the landscape itself. He has given the spy master a new avenue of research, a breadcrumb trail that will lead her, indirectly, to the same conclusion he already knows. The council members pause, their own brilliant minds beginning to work on these new variables. The general frowns, already recalculating supply lines based on the possibility of a water shortage. The spy master makes a mental note to retrieve her grandfather's journals. The king watches them, a master gardener tending to his prize roses, gently guiding their growth without ever showing his hand. He will lead them to the correct decision, the decision to fortify their own border and wait, letting the coming drought do their work for them. They will arrive at this conclusion on their own, or so they will believe. They will think it is the product of their own genius, their own diligent research. They will leave this room feeling proud and accomplished, secure in their roles as the brilliant minds who advise their wise but ultimately human king. He is their shepherd, guiding his flock of fleeting, fiery minds, protecting them from dangers they cannot even see. It is a lonely, thankless, and utterly necessary task. And it is, perhaps, the most exhausting part of his day. Following the intellectual gymnastics of the council meeting, the king retreats to a small, quiet study, a room lined not with portraits, but with shelves of rolled-up maps and astronomical charts. This next part of his day is a solitary and meditative task, a period of quiet, monotonous work that is, in its own way, a relief from the complexities of dealing with fleeting mortal minds. This is the hour of the decrees, the time when the morning's decisions are transformed from spoken words into the immutable, binding law of the land. He sits at a large, scarred oak desk, a surface that has borne the weight of his elbows for centuries. Before him are a stack of freshly prepared parchments, an inkwell filled with dark, iron gall ink, a pot of fragrant crimson wax, and a small flickering oil lamp for melting it. The only other person in the room is the royal scribe, a thin, spectacled man with ink-stained fingers who sits at a small adjacent desk, his presence as quiet and unobtrusive as a piece of furniture. The scribe's job is not to write, but to present the documents, to blot the ink, and to bear silent witness to the official transformation of will into law. The king picks up the first document. It is the decree regarding the northern farmers, granting them their tax deferment and the release of the blight-resistant seed corn. The scribe has transcribed his words in a flawless, elegant script, the formal language of the court dressing the simple decision in robes of state. The king reads it over, not to check for errors, but as a final, quiet moment of contemplation. Then he takes the quill. It is a long, black feather from a mountain eagle, its tip sharpened to a perfect fine point. He has used this same quill for 50 years. When its point dulls, he will sharpen it himself with a small silver penknife. He dips the quill into the inkwell. The ink is a deep, rich black, made from a recipe of oak galls, iron salts, and wine, a formula that has remained unchanged for centuries. It has a sharp, metallic, slightly sour smell, the smell of permanence. He brings the quill to the parchment. The sound it makes is a dry, satisfying scratch, a tiny, personal noise in the profound silence of the room. It is a sound he knows better than the sound of his own voice. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He signs his name. It is not a flourishing, ostentatious signature, but a simple, spare, and almost geometric mark, a symbol that is as much a seal of office as a personal name. The scribe, with practiced efficiency, sprinkles a fine, sandy powder over the wet ink to absorb the excess, then gently blows it away, leaving the king's mark sharp and black against the creamy parchment. The process is then repeated for the decrees concerning the guildmasters. He signs the order for the subsidy for the new looms, the charter for the joint seafaring venture, the revised jurisdictional boundaries for the weavers and tailors. Each scratch of the quill is a small act of immense consequence, a tiny ripple that will spread outwards, touching the lives of thousands. The subsidy for the looms will mean a weaver's daughter can afford a dowry. The new sea route will make a merchant captain wealthy, but may also cost a dozen sailors their lives in a storm. The jurisdictional decree will end a bitter feud, but it will also put a small, independent tailor out of business. The king is aware of all this. He feels the immense branching out consequences of each stroke of his pen. He is not just signing documents, he is weaving the very fabric of his kingdom, pulling on 1,000 different threads at once. It is a responsibility that would crush any mortal man, a weight of causality that would drive them mad. For him, it is simply the job. After the official decrees are signed, there is a smaller pile of documents to attend to. These are the mundane, everyday petitions and grants that are the quiet, steady hum of the kingdom's machinery. He signs a charter for a new village to be built by a river in the south. He signs a pension grant for an old soldier who lost a leg in a long-forgotten skirmish. He signs a warrant for the arrest of a corrupt tax collector in a distant port city. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The quill moves with a steady, unvarying rhythm. Each signature is a drop of ink in an endless ocean of paperwork, a single grain of sand on the infinite beach of his reign. He has signed millions of these documents. They are the flotsam and jetsam of his history, the paper trail of his eternity. The scribe places the last document before him. It is a land grant, a deed affirming a family's right to a small plot of farmland and the stream that runs through it. The king looks at the family name written on the parchment. Cavern. The name sparks a flicker of recognition deep in his memory. He pauses, his quill hovering over the document. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the vast, dusty archives of his mind search for the reference. And then he finds it. Cavern. He remembers the first one, a young, eager soldier who had fought bravely at the Battle of the Crimson Field, a brutal conflict that had secured the kingdom's eastern border 1,000 years ago. As a reward for his service, the king had granted him that very same plot of land, a peaceful place to build a home and raise a family. Now, 30 generations later, here are his descendants. their claim to the land being reaffirmed by the same hand that first granted it. The family has lived and died on that small patch of earth for a millennium, their connection to the land a deep and powerful thing. For them, this document is a sacred inheritance, the foundation of their entire world. For the king, it is a single, poignant, and deeply wearying moment. He has outlived the entire history of this family. He is a god, not of the harvest or the hunt, but of bureaucracy, a deity of deeds and decrees. He opens his eyes, dips his quill in the ink one last time, and with a steady hand he signs his name. The Oakhaven family's land is secure for another generation. Finally, the last document is presented. The scribe brings forth a blank parchment and the pot of crimson wax, its surface now a molten, shimmering pool from the heat of the lamp. The king takes his heavy gold signet ring, the one bearing the ancient crest of his kingdom, and presses it firmly into the warm wax. The symbol cools, hardens, and becomes the final unbreakable seal of his authority. The hour is over. The machinery of rule has been attended to. The king rises, leaving the desk covered in the tangible evidence of his power, a collection of small papers that will now go out into the world and become reality. After the signing of the decrees, the king undertakes a part of his routine that is understood by no one else in the castle. He does not go to the training yards, nor the treasury, nor the royal gardens. Instead, he takes a small spiral staircase down into the deep, cool foundations of the castle. Here, protected by a single massive iron-bound door, is a place known simply as the archive. This is not the royal library, a grand public space filled with histories and books of poetry. The archive is a much quieter, more sacred, and far more personal place. It is a vast circular room, its walls lined from floor to ceiling with thousands upon thousands of tightly packed leather-bound scrolls. The air here is cool, dry, and smells of old parchment and cedar wood. There is no natural light, only the soft, steady glow of a few enchanted crystals that shed a light that is kind to ancient ink. In the center of this room sits a single large table and a single occupant. This is the royal archivist. The man who currently holds the title is named Cavern, a quiet, scholarly man in his late 60s, with gentle eyes magnified by thick spectacles. The position of royal archivist is unique in all the kingdom. It is not the job of a historian tasked with interpreting the past. It is the job of a librarian, and the library he tends is the mind of the king himself. Immortality, the king learned many centuries ago, does not grant perfect instantaneous recall. His mind is not an organized book. It is a vast, chaotic, and ever-expanding library. Memories are not filed neatly by date or subject. They are a jumble of sensations, emotions, and facts, layered one on top of the other like sedimentary rock. A recent memory of a council meeting might be inexplicably tangled with the memory of a childhood pet from 2,000 years ago. The taste of the morning's cheese can trigger a vivid recollection of the milkmaid who first made it. It is a vast, overwhelming, and deeply disorganized collection of data, and the archivist is the one who holds the catalog. The king enters the quiet room, and Cavern rises from his chair, bowing his head in a gesture of deep, familiar respect. There are no formal greetings here. The relationship between the king and his archivist is too old and too unique for such pleasantries. "Calen," the king says, his voice quiet in the hushed space. A query. Calen simply nods, waiting patiently. "The Sunstone Treaty of the Third Age," the king begins, his gaze distant as he plumbs the depths of his own memory. "The one negotiated with the lizard folk of the southern swamps. I recall the main territorial agreements clearly, but there was a subordinate clause, something regarding the rights to the Blackwater River during the dry season. My recollection is crowded on this point." This is the nature of their consultations. The king provides the broad strokes, the key memory, the anchor point. The archivist provides the specific, factual detail. It is a symbiotic relationship, a partnership between a living memory and its curator. Calen does not need to consult any grand index or catalog. The archive is not organized by subject, but by a complex, mnemonic system known only to his family. A system passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, for over 1,500 years. The position of keeper of the king's memory is the most sacred and secret hereditary role in the kingdom. Calen's great-great-grandmother served the king in this very room, just as he serves him now. He turns, his movements precise and unhurried, and walks to a specific section of the wall. He scans the thousands of identical scroll cases, his eyes moving with an arcane certainty. He is not reading titles. He is reading patterns, positions, and subtle markings that are invisible to any other eye. He reaches out and, with gentle, practiced fingers, he pulls a single, dark leather scroll case from the wall. The case is worn smooth with age, its leather dry and cracked. He brings it back to the table, and, with the reverence of a priest handling a holy relic, he opens it. Inside is a scroll of vellum so old and fine it is almost translucent. He unrolls it carefully on the table, its surface covered in the tight, angular script of the Third Age, a language that has not been spoken in the kingdom for millennia. Calen cannot read the words, but he does not need to. He simply presents the document to the king. The king leans over the table, his eyes scanning the ancient text. A faint, wry smile touches his lips. He remembers this. He remembers the stuffy, humid tent where the negotiations took place, the smell of swamp mud and strange spiced lizard folk wine. He remembers the difficulty of trying to explain the concept of a legal clause to a chieftain whose primary mode of negotiation involved hitting things with a large rock-studded club. And as his eyes fall upon the specific section of the text, the memory crystallizes. "Ah," he says softly, more to himself than to Calen. "There it is." The clause states that the river rights are shared, but that in times of drought, precedence is given to whichever party performs the ritual of appeasement to the river god. He remembers adding this clause as a last-minute compromise. He also remembers that he himself had invented the river god and the ritual of appeasement, a rather silly ceremony involving chanting and the tossing of shiny pebbles into the water, on the spot, as a way to give the lizard folk a sense of spiritual victory, while ensuring the river's resources were managed equitably. The entire conflict that was brewing with the current lizard folk descendants, a conflict his council was preparing to debate, was based on a forgotten 2,000-year-old joke. He straightens up, the memory now clear and sharp in his mind. He has what he needs. He has not learned a new fact. He has simply retrieved one from the cluttered, dusty shelves of his own mind, with the help of his librarian. "Thank you, Kalen," the king says. "That is all." Kalen bows again, and with the same delicate care, he rolls up the ancient scroll, places it back in its case, and returns it to its precise, anonymous spot on the wall. The consultation is over. The king turns and leaves the archive, his mind now armed with a piece of ancient, absurd truth that will allow him to prevent a needless conflict. As he climbs the spiral staircase back to the upper levels of the castle, he feels a profound sense of gratitude for the long, unbroken line of keepers. They do not just store his laws and treaties, they store him. They are the guardians of his sanity, the curators of his soul, the only ones who truly understand that being immortal is not about knowing everything, but about the terrifying, overwhelming burden of having forgotten more than most people will ever learn. The midday sun reaches its zenith, casting short, sharp shadows across the kingdom. Within the castle, the gears of state slow for a time. The counselors have dispersed, the petitioners have gone home, and a quiet lull settles over the ancient stone halls. For the king, this marks the transition to the second half of his day, a period defined not by duty, but by a deep, profound, and carefully cultivated solitude. He does not take his midday meal in a grand dining hall surrounded by the clamor of his court. He takes it alone, on a small, secluded stone balcony that juts out from the western face of the royal spire. This balcony is his private sanctuary, a place high above the world where he can eat and think undisturbed. A single small table and chair have already been placed there by servants who move with the silent efficiency of ghosts. A simple meal is laid out, a piece of grilled fish, a handful of olives, a slice of melon, and a goblet of chilled wine. It is a light, clean meal, a concession to the warmth of the afternoon. The king sits, the stone of the chair cool through his silver tunic. From this high vantage point, the entire capital city is spread out before him like a living map. He can see the winding streets, the tightly packed rooftops, the great bustling market square, the slow brown ribbon of the river as it snakes its way to the sea. The sounds of the city rise up to him on the warm air, a distant, muted symphony of mortal life. He hears the faint, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of merchants hawking their wares, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestones, and the indistinguishable, collective hum of thousands of human voices. It is the sound of a city that is alive, vibrant, and utterly oblivious to his lonely vigil. He eats slowly, his movements deliberate. He takes a bite of the fish, its taste clean and familiar, and he contemplates the reason for his solitude. There was a time, many centuries ago, in the spring of his long reign, when he tried to be a more social king. He would take his meals with his queen, with his children, with his trusted council members. He would laugh at their jokes, listen to their stories, and engage in the light, easy chatter that is the glue of mortal relationships. But he soon learned the terrible price of such intimacy. To share a meal with someone day after day is to weave your life into theirs. It is to create a bond, a shared history built of small, ordinary moments. And for him, every one of those bonds was a string tied to a stone that was destined to sink into the dark waters of time. He remembers the face of his first queen, Alara, laughing as she stole an olive from his plate. He remembers the serious, thoughtful expression of his son, Torvin, as they discussed philosophy over bread and wine. He remembers the bawdy, drunken toasts of his old friend, General Kalen. And he remembers the terrible, aching silence at the table after they were all gone. Each empty chair was a fresh wound, a screaming monument to his loss. After the first few centuries, the pain became too much to bear. He learned that solitude was not a punishment, but a shield. It was a suit of armor he wore to protect his weary heart from the endless, repeating cycle of attachment and grief. To eat alone was to remain aloof, to keep the fleeting lives of those around him at a safe, manageable distance. It was an act of self-preservation, a necessary cruelty he inflicted upon himself to maintain his sanity. So now he eats alone, his only companions the wind and the distant, anonymous hum of the city below. He finishes his meal and sips his wine, his gaze drifting over the sprawling metropolis. He is like a man watching an ant farm, observing the frantic, purposeful activity of its inhabitants with a kind of detached, affectionate curiosity. But unlike a man watching an ant farm, the king remembers how the farm used to look. He sees the city not as a static place, but as a living, breathing, constantly changing organism. His immortal gaze is a time-lapse photography, allowing him to see the layers of history that lie buried beneath the present. His eyes fall upon the grand market square. He sees the bustling crowds of today, but he also sees the same square 100 years ago, when it was paved with dirt instead of stone. He sees it 200 years ago, when the great fountain in its center was a simple well. He sees it 500 years ago, when it was an open field where farmers grazed their sheep. He looks towards the riverfront and sees a row of new stone-faced warehouses built to accommodate the burgeoning trade from the south. But in his mind's eye, he also sees what used to be there, a row of beloved, ramshackle old taverns with names like the Salty Siren and the Drunken Dragon, places where he himself, disguised in a hooded cloak, had once shared an ale and listened to the songs of sailors. Those taverns are gone, replaced by the relentless march of commerce. Their songs are forgotten by everyone but him. His gaze sweeps over a newly built residential district with its neat rows of houses and clean, wide streets. He knows that beneath those very streets lies the old city cemetery, the final resting place of thousands of his former subjects. Their graves now paved over, their names lost to time. He is the sole, silent witness to this endless cycle of demolition and construction, of forgetting and rebuilding. He is a living archive of a city that is constantly erasing its own past. To the mortals below, the city is a permanent, solid thing, the only world they have ever known. To the king, it is as ephemeral as a sandcastle, constantly being reshaped by the tides of time. He feels no anger or sadness at these changes. It is simply the nature of things. He is the rock, and the city is the river that flows around him, its course ever shifting, its waters ever changing. He is the only constant in a world of variables. He finishes his wine, the last of the cool liquid, a small comfort in the afternoon heat. His solitary repast is over. He has taken his nourishment, and he has communed with his memories. He stands, casting one last long look over the city, the great, sprawling, beautiful, and heartbreakingly temporary home of his people. Then he turns and steps back into the cool, silent stone of his castle, leaving the noise and the bustle of the mortal world behind. In the warm, drowsy hours of the late afternoon, when the business of the kingdom has quieted, the king seeks out a different kind of companionship. He leaves the cold, formal stone of the castle behind and enters a place of living green. This is his royal menagerie, but it is not a collection of caged and exotic beasts. There are no roaring lions here, no proud peacocks, no stables filled with fine, spirited horses. The king learned long ago that the love for a mortal animal, with its heart-breakingly short lifespan, is a pain he can no longer afford. A beloved hound lives for a decade, a favorite horse perhaps 3. For him, these are relationships that are over in the blink of an eye, a fleeting joy followed by the inevitable, weary ritual of digging a small grave. His companions, therefore, are of a different nature. They are beings for whom time moves at a pace much closer to his own. The menagerie is a quiet, secluded garden, walled off from the rest of the castle grounds. It is a lush, slightly wild place, with ancient, gnarled trees, thick carpets of moss, and a small, clear stream that trickles through its center. The king walks the winding paths, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. He is not just a king in his garden. He is a friend visiting his friends. His first stop is by the edge of the stream, where a large, sun-warmed boulder sits amongst the ferns. As the king approaches, the boulder slowly, almost imperceptibly, moves. A great, wrinkled reptilian head emerges from a hole at one end, followed by 4 thick, elephantine legs. This is Cassian, a giant tortoise of a species thought to be long extinct. His shell is a massive high dome, the color of old granite, and it has been worn so smooth over the centuries that it shines like polished stone in the dappled sunlight. The king found Cassian 900 years ago, a tiny, determined hatchling no bigger than the palm of his hand, struggling to free itself from its sandy nest on a remote southern island. The king brought him back to the castle, and they have been companions ever since. The king sits down on the soft moss beside the great tortoise, his back against the warm, sun-baked shell. He does not speak. He simply reaches out and gently strokes Cassian's ancient leathery neck. The tortoise closes his dark, intelligent eyes and emits a low, soft, rumbling hiss of contentment. They sit like this for a long time, in a comfortable, absolute silence. There is no need for words between them. They are two ancient beings sharing a quiet moment of stillness in a world that rushes past them. Cassian has seen 9 centuries of the king's reign. He has seen queens and counselors come and go. He has seen the garden itself grow and change around him. His perspective, his sense of time, is a slow, geological one. A decade to Cassian is but a fleeting moment. In this, he is the king's closest confidant. They share a bond that is beyond language, a silent understanding of what it means to endure. The tortoise understands permanence in a way no human ever could. He is a living mountain, a quiet, patient friend who has never asked for anything but a patch of sun and the king's gentle, familiar touch. After a time, the king gives Cassian one last soft pat on the neck, and the great head slowly retracts back into its shell. The king rises and continues his walk. He follows the path deeper into the garden, towards a shady, secluded grotto where the stream pools before trickling down a small, moss-covered waterfall. The air here is cool and damp, and the sound of the water is a soft, soothing murmur. In the center of the grotto, nestled amongst the ferns and the wet, black rocks, is what appears to be a large, mossy mound of earth. It is roughly humanoid in shape, but it is completely still. Its surface a thick carpet of vibrant green moss, with small, delicate wildflowers growing from its shoulders and head. This is another of the king's companions. It is a small, slumbering earth elemental, a creature of stone and soil and deep, slow consciousness. The king has known it for over 3,000 years. It was here in this garden long before the first stone of the castle was ever laid. The elemental spends most of its time in a deep, soil-rich sleep, a state of hibernation that can last for decades or even centuries. Its life is not measured in days or years, but in the slow, patient turning of the geological ages. It feels the shifting of the tectonic plates, the slow erosion of the mountains, the deep, secret life of the roots of the ancient trees. The king sits on a stone bench opposite the slumbering elemental, his hands resting on his knees. He does not try to wake it. The elemental wakes on its own schedule, governed by rhythms that are far beyond mortal comprehension. The last time it awoke was 60 years ago. The king had been sitting in this very spot when the mossy mound had stirred, 2 slow green eyes opening like blossoming flowers. The elemental had spoken, its voice a low, rumbling sound like stones grinding together deep underground. It had spoken of the weariness of the bedrock beneath the castle and had asked the king if he remembered the last great ice age. The king had remembered, and they had shared a brief, strange conversation, a discussion between 2 beings who were, in essence, landscapes. Then the elemental's eyes had slowly closed, and it had sunk back into its long, deep slumber, not to be disturbed for another century or so. The king sits with the sleeping elemental, feeling a sense of profound kinship. This creature, more than any other, is his true peer. It is a being for whom time is not a line, but a vast, deep, and slow-moving ocean. It understands the burden of a long memory, the weariness of an ancient consciousness. The king, the tortoise, and the elemental, they are a secret society of the ageless, a quiet fraternity of beings left behind by the rushing tide of the world. He finds more comfort in this silent grotto, in the presence of this sleeping mound of earth, than he does in any council meeting or royal audience. Here he is not a king. He is simply one old thing in the company of another. After a while, the king rises and quietly leaves the grotto, leaving the elemental to its deep green dreams. His walk through the menagerie is complete. He has visited with his only true friends, the only companions who do not cause him the pain of inevitable loss. As he walks back towards the castle, he feels a sense of quiet equilibrium, his soul soothed by the slow, patient, and deeply silent company of those who, like him, are masters of the art of enduring. As the afternoon begins its slow, golden descent into evening, the king finds himself drawn back to his lonely sanctuary, the stone balcony high above the capital. The frantic energy of the midday city has softened, replaced by a gentler, more weary hum as its people begin the process of ending their day. Carts are being packed away in the market square. Shopkeepers are shuttering their windows, and the warm, inviting glow of hearth fires begins to prick the growing twilight. For the thousands of souls in the city below, this time of day has a clear and comforting meaning. It is an ending. It is the end of work, the end of worry, the end of the day's struggles. It is a time to return home, to gather with family, to eat and to rest, to close a small, finite chapter of their short, precious lives. The king returns to his solitary chair and sits, his gaze turned towards the west, where the sun has begun its spectacular final performance. He is not here to mark an ending. For him, there are no endings, only transitions. The sunset is not a conclusion. It is merely a slow, graceful handover of illumination from one celestial body to another, from the fiery golden light of the sun to the cool, silvery light of the moon and stars. It is a shifting of the celestial guard, a routine he has witnessed more times than there are stones in his castle. He watches as the sun, a great molten orb of orange and red, sinks towards the sharp, jagged peaks of the distant mountains. The sky is transformed into a breathtaking canvas of color. Streaks of crimson and violet bleed into vast swaths of deep, bruised purple and soft, delicate pink. The clouds are set ablaze, their edges trimmed with liquid gold. It is a sight of profound and heart-stopping beauty, a daily masterpiece painted across the heavens. The king appreciates this beauty. He sees the artistry in it, the perfect, ephemeral composition of light and color. But his appreciation is different from that of the mortals below. For a young couple watching this same sunset from a park bench, the beauty is sharp and poignant, made all the more precious because it is fleeting. They know that this particular sunset, in this particular moment of their lives, will never come again. It is a unique and unrepeatable event, a memory they will cherish. For the king, the beauty is tinged with a deep cosmic melancholy. He has seen this exact sunset before. Not this one precisely, but thousands of others that are functionally identical. He has seen the sun set behind these same mountains for millennia. He has seen it paint the sky with these same colors time and time again. The beauty for him is not in its uniqueness, but in its relentless, eternal repetition. He remembers watching a sunset just like this one with his first queen, Alara, standing on the ramparts of a newly built castle. She had leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered that she wished the moment could last forever. The terrible, tragic irony of her wish has never left him. The moment did not last, and neither did she. But the sunset, and he did. He is not just watching the sun set on a single day. He is watching it set on an entire world of lost moments. He looks at the fiery orb and remembers watching it sink into the glassy surface of a western ocean, its light reflecting in the eyes of a son he was teaching to sail. He remembers watching it through the narrow slit of a campaign tent window, the sky red as blood on the eve of a great battle. He remembers watching it from the depths of a profound grief, the colors of the sky seeming like a cruel mockery after he had buried a child. This sunset is not a single event. It is 1,000 sunsets, a collage of every evening he has ever lived, all layered one on top of the other. The weight of these memories is almost as heavy as the crown itself. And he thinks of the civilizations. He has seen the sun set on entire empires. He remembers the great Sunstone Empire of the South, a civilization that worshipped the sunset as a daily sacrifice to their fiery god. Their priests would stand on the tops of their golden pyramids and chant as the sun died, believing their rituals were necessary to ensure its return the next morning. The king had found their theology a bit presumptuous, but he had admired their architecture. He watched the sun set on the day their final city fell to barbarian hordes, the sky filled with the same indifferent, beautiful colors of crimson and gold as it was on the day of their greatest triumphs. The sun, he learned, does not care. It is a dispassionate artist, painting its masterpieces for an audience that is constantly changing, constantly dying. As the last brilliant sliver of the sun disappears behind the mountains, and the colors in the sky begin to soften and fade into the deep, velvety blue of twilight, a profound silence settles over the world. The king sits alone on his balcony, a solitary, unmoving silhouette against the dying light. He will see this again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, for 1,000 years and 1,000 more. The mountains may wear down, the river may change its course, the city below may crumble to dust and be rebuilt 12 times, but he will still be here, in this chair, on this balcony, watching this same beautiful, heartbreakingly eternal sunset. He is the permanent audience, for a fleeting applause is for all the people who are no longer here to see it with him. As the last vestiges of twilight fade from the sky, and the first sharp pinpricks of starlight appear. The king leaves the lonely balcony and descends into another of his private sanctuaries. This is not the menagerie of his ancient undying companions. This is a place of a different, more poignant kind of remembrance. It is the ancestral garden. The name is a misnomer, a piece of quiet, personal irony. To the rest of the castle, it is simply the Western Grove, a beautiful and ancient collection of trees. But for the king, it is a living graveyard, a place where his memories have taken root and grown towards the sky. The garden is vast and silent, filled with the soft, rustling sound of leaves in the gentle night breeze. The air is cool and smells of damp earth, night-blooming jasmine, and the faint, resinous scent of pine. Every tree in this garden, from the mightiest oak to the most slender birch, was planted by the king's own hand, and each one marks the passing of someone he loved. He begins his slow, familiar walk along the winding, moss-covered paths. This is a pilgrimage he makes often, a quiet, nightly ritual of communion with his ghosts. The trees are his only true ancestors, the only lineage that he has not outlived. Each one is a story, a chapter in the long, sorrowful book of his heart. He stops first before a colossal, ancient oak, its trunk gnarled and thick, its branches reaching towards the heavens like the arms of a weary old giant. Its bark is a thick, rugged tapestry of deep fissures and calloused knots. The king reaches out and places his hand on the rough surface. This tree is Torvin. He planted it as a small, hopeful acorn on the day his firstborn son was born, over a millennium ago. He remembers Torvin as a serious, thoughtful boy who grew into a wise and capable man. He remembers the pride he felt watching his son mature, the secret hope that perhaps in him he had found a worthy successor. And he remembers the terrible, helpless grief of watching that same strong man be reduced to a frail, feverish shadow by a sickness that no royal physician could cure. He had held Torvin's hand as he died, a man of 80 years old who looked like a child next to his ageless father. The oak tree has now stood for 1,000 years, a silent, living monument to a life that was cut so tragically short. The king feels the rough bark under his palm and feels not the wood, but the echo of his son's presence. He continues his walk, his feet silent on the soft, mossy ground. He passes a small grove of silver birches, their slender, white trunks gleaming faintly in the moonlight. These are the children of his third wife, Ilara, the queen who gave him 3 beautiful, laughing daughters before she too was taken by the unforgiving passage of time. He remembers their laughter ringing through this garden, their small hands helping him plant these very saplings. The birches are tall and graceful now, but to him they will always be his 3 little girls. Further on, he comes to a large, tranquil pond, its surface a mirror of black water reflecting the star-dusted sky. On the edge of the pond grows a magnificent weeping willow, its long, slender branches trailing in the still water like the grieving hair of a sorrowful woman. This tree is Lyra, his beloved second wife, a queen of quiet beauty and gentle grace. She had loved this spot and they had spent countless evenings here, watching the moon rise over the water. She had been a poet, and her verses spoke of the beauty of fleeting moments. The king had never truly understood her obsession with endings until she too had one. He had planted this willow on the day of her funeral, its drooping branches a perfect living expression of his own immeasurable grief. The willow has grown vast and beautiful, its sorrowful form a place of profound and peaceful melancholy. He stands beneath its branches and feels as though he is standing within the memory of her embrace. The garden is full of such stories. Every tree is a name, a face, a memory. There is a tall, unyielding ironwood for his stern but loyal chancellor, a man who served him for 60 years. There is a cluster of sweet-smelling apple trees for a jolly, fat cook who had once made him a perfect apple pie that he could still, on rare occasions, almost taste. There is even a single, thorny, resilient hawthorn bush in a remote corner of the garden, planted for a bitter rival, a neighboring king he had fought a long and bloody war against, a man who had despised, but in a strange way, respected for his tenacity. This garden is the king's truest history book. The official histories in the library record the dates of battles, the signing of treaties, the lineage of nobles. But this garden records the history of his heart. It is a chronicle of his attachments, a testament to his capacity for love and his endless, crushing capacity for loss. To any other observer, this is a place of profound peace and natural beauty. And it is. But for the king, it is also a place of immense, quiet sorrow. It is a beautiful, thriving monument to his own eternal loneliness. Every magnificent, living tree is a reminder of a beloved person who is dead. The entire garden is a testament to the fact that everything he loves, everything he touches, everything he cherishes will eventually turn to dust and be replaced by a tree. As he walks, he sometimes speaks to them, his voice a low, soft murmur that is absorbed by the leaves. He tells Torvin's oak that his great-great-great-grandson, the current General Aris, has the same stubborn set to his jaw. He tells Lyra's willow that the moon is just as beautiful tonight as it was on the night she wrote her last poem. It is a conversation with ghosts, a monologue delivered to an audience of silent wooden sentinels. He is the sole caretaker of this living graveyard, the only one who knows the names of the dead who are buried here, not in the soil, but in the living wood of the trees themselves. He reaches the end of the path and turns back, his slow walk to the castle a retreat from the overwhelming weight of his own heart. The garden, with its rustling leaves and its silent arboreal ghosts, will be here waiting for him tomorrow night, a beautiful, tragic, and eternal reminder of the price of forever. After his somber walk through the garden of living ghosts, the king retires to the final sanctuary of his day, his private library. This room is different from all the others. It is not a place of public duty like the throne room, nor a place of quiet sorrow like the garden. This is a place of intellect, of fact, of the endless, sprawling, and often incorrect story of his own life. The library is a circular tower room, its high, curved walls lined with thousands of leather-bound books. The air smells of old paper, cracked leather, and beeswax polish. A single large desk sits in the center of the room, illuminated by the soft, steady glow of a crystal lamp. This is where the king spends the last few hours of his waking day, not in idle pleasure, but in a strange and lonely form of scholarship. He does not read fiction. After living for several millennia, he has found that no imagined story can possibly compete with the sheer, improbable strangeness of what he has actually witnessed. He does not read poetry. The verses of mortal poets, so full of passionate urgency about fleeting love and the terror of death, now feel to him like the sincere but simplistic drawings of a child. No, the king reads only one subject. He reads history. He selects a heavy leather-bound tome from a shelf and settles into his chair. The book is titled The Wars of the Crimson Standard, written by a celebrated historian named Master Vorlog, who lived and died some 200 years ago. The king opens the book, its pages crisp and smelling faintly of dust. He begins to read an account of the Battle of the Weeping Valley, a pivotal conflict from that war. The historian's prose is dramatic and compelling. He describes the brilliant, decisive cavalry charge led by the Immortal King himself, a move that shattered the enemy's flank and secured a glorious victory. The king reads the account with a faint, wry smile. He remembers the Battle of the Weeping Valley very well. He remembers the relentless, driving rain that had turned the valley into a muddy quagmire. He remembers that the brilliant, decisive cavalry charge was, in fact, a panicked, desperate retreat that had, by sheer dumb luck, stumbled directly into the enemy's poorly defended command tent, causing a comical amount of chaos and leading to an accidental victory. The historian, of course, working from third-hand accounts and battlefield myths, had turned a sloppy, terrified scramble into a masterstroke of military genius. The king feels no anger at the inaccuracy. He has learned that this is the nature of history. It is a story told after the fact, a narrative smoothed and polished until it makes a kind of sense that the messy, chaotic reality never did. He turns the page and reads on. He finds a passage where the historian, Master Vorlog, analyzes the king's motivations for the war. Vorlog, with great intellectual confidence, posits a complex theory involving trade disputes, dynastic ambitions, and a desire to secure a new source of iron ore. It is a very clever and well-reasoned theory. It is also completely wrong. The king remembers the true reason for the war. It was because the boorish, pig-headed king of the rival nation had insulted his wife's taste in hats at a diplomatic banquet. It was a petty, foolish, and deeply personal reason, the kind of thing that never makes it into the official histories, but is, more often than not, the true engine of great events. The king closes the book for a moment, a wave of profound intellectual loneliness washing over him. This entire library, this vast collection of human knowledge, is, for him, a diary. It is the story of his life, written by a succession of strangers who have tried, with varying degrees of success, to understand him, to interpret his actions, to explain the inexplicable phenomenon of his existence. He pulls another book from the shelf. This one is older, its leather binding cracked and faded. It is a study of the ageless monarch, written by a philosopher from the 5th Age. This particular author did not have to rely on third-hand accounts. The king had actually granted him a series of interviews, a rare and unusual occurrence. He had been fond of the man, a gentle soul with an insatiably curious mind. The king finds the chapter where the philosopher attempts to grapple with the psychological implications of his immortality. The king, the philosopher writes, must surely possess a serenity unknown to mortal men, a profound peace born of his long perspective, a mind free from the petty anxieties of our fleeting lives. The king reads the sentence and lets out a soft, almost inaudible sigh. Serenity, peace. If only the poor, dear man had known the truth. If only he could have explained the constant, low-grade fear, the crushing weight of memory, the profound weariness that settled in his bones like silt in a slow-moving river. But he could not. How could he explain the feeling of outliving his own children to a man who was terrified of his own mortality? How could he describe the loneliness of forever to a mind that could not conceive of a single century? He had offered the philosopher only placid, enigmatic answers, allowing him to construct a theory that was comforting and noble, but ultimately a fiction. He is the world's greatest primary source, a living, breathing historical artifact. He is the only person in the entire world who knows the real truth behind the myths, the petty realities behind the grand narratives. He knows which legendary hero was actually a coward, which sainted queen was secretly cruel, which epic poem is based on a drunken brawl. He holds the key to every mystery, the answer to every historical debate. But he has no one to tell. He is the ultimate scholar, forever trapped in a peer review group of one. The knowledge he possesses is a heavy, useless treasure, a library of truth locked away in the solitary confinement of his own mind. He spends these last hours of his day in this lonely pursuit, reading the fictions that have been written about his life, quietly, sadly, and sometimes with a touch of bitter amusement, correcting the footnotes in his own head. He is a ghost at the feast of his own history, a silent observer, watching as others try and fail to piece together the puzzle of his life. And as the crystal lamp on his desk casts a warm, lonely glow on the open page, the Immortal King, the loneliest scholar in the world, reads on, forever trapped between the truth he knows and the stories they tell. The crystal lamp in the library has burned low, its soft light seeming to grow weary alongside the king. He closes the final heavy tome, the soft thud of leather on leather, the only sound in the tower room. His night of lonely scholarship is over. He has spent hours wandering through the faded, inaccurate maps of his own past, and the familiar, profound exhaustion has finally settled upon him. It is time. He rises from his chair, his movements as slow and deliberate as they were at the start of the day, and begins the final, solitary walk back to his bedchamber. He retraces his steps through the great, silent halls of the castle. The portraits of his lost loved ones are now shrouded in a darkness so complete that their faces are invisible, their ghostly presence for a time muted. The moonlight that streams through the high windows is colder now, a thin, silvery light that seems to offer no warmth, only a weary illumination for his final journey of the day. He arrives at the door to his chamber. It opens silently before him, and he steps inside. The room is exactly as he left it. The ancient bed, the faded tapestry, the profound waiting silence. The two young servants are there, materializing from the shadows as if they have been waiting all day for this single moment. They are different faces from this morning's pair, the night shift, cousins perhaps of the day shift servants. It matters little. They are another set of anonymous, reverent hands here to perform the final ritual of the day. The process of undressing is the morning's routine in perfect mirror reverse. They gently remove the wyvern hide boots, unfasten the clasps of the silver tunic. Each layer of clothing is peeled away, and with it a layer of the king's public persona. The armor of routine is being carefully dismantled. They work in complete, practiced silence, their movements efficient and respectful. He is not a person to them. He is a sacred object, a living relic to be tended with the utmost care. He does not speak to them. He simply stands, a still, patient figure at the center of their quiet, meticulous work. Finally, he is left in a simple linen shift, the day's regalia put away for the night. The servants offer a final deep bow and then retreat from the room as silently as they entered, pulling the heavy door closed behind them. And the king is, at last, truly alone. He walks to the great cold bed, the bed carved from a petrified tree. He pulls back the impossibly fine silk sheets, the fabric cool and smooth against his skin. He lies down, his head sinking into a pillow that offers no comfort, only a familiar hardness. He lies on his back, his hands resting at his sides, his eyes open to the oppressive, absolute darkness of the ceiling above. The day is done. He has listened to the pleas of the farmers, navigated the greed of the merchants, guided the ambitions of his council. He has signed the laws, consulted the archives, communed with his ancient, silent friends. He has walked through his living graveyard and read the flawed diary of his own endless life. He has performed all the duties, all the rituals, all the monotonous and necessary tasks that give shape and meaning to his day. And now there is nothing left but this, the waiting. He waits for sleep. For a mortal, sleep is a necessity, a biological function for the resting of the body and the repairing of the mind. It is a brief pause before the adventure of the next day. For the Immortal King, sleep is something far more profound, something far more desperate. It is not rest. It is escape. It is the only true ending he is ever granted. It is a temporary abdication from the throne of his own consciousness. To be awake is to be constantly, relentlessly aware of the crushing weight of his own memory. To be awake is to hear the echoes of 1,000 lost voices in every silent room. To see the ghosts of 1,000 beloved faces in every crowd. To be awake is to feel the unending sorrow of outliving everything and everyone you have ever known. To be awake is to be the sole prisoner in the solitary confinement of your own mind. Sleep is the key to that prison door. It is a brief, merciful parole from the life sentence of being himself. It is the only time his mind is quiet, the only time the ghosts are silent. The dreamless, black oblivion of sleep is not a void to be feared. It is a sanctuary to be coveted. It is the one mercy that his immortality has not stripped from him. He closes his eyes. He does not count sheep. He does not meditate on peaceful scenes. He simply wills himself to stop. He focuses on the darkness behind his eyelids, inviting it to consume him. He yearns for the slow, gentle, downward spiral into nothingness. The moment when the I at the center of his being dissolves, when the king ceases to be, and there is only quiet, empty, blessed silence. He feels it coming now, that slow, welcome tide. The weight of the crown, the ache of the garden, the loneliness of the library, all of it begins to recede, to grow distant. The great, vast, and noisy library of his mind is finally closing for the night. The keeper of his memories is dousing the lamps and locking the doors. He welcomes this. He craves it. He welcomes the slow fade to black, the profound and final invitation to silence, just as you, perhaps, do now. The final image is of the dark, silent room. The king is a still, unmoving shape in the ancient bed. The screen holds on this image of perfect stillness, and then, slowly, it begins to fade, a gentle, gradual descent into absolute blackness. And as it fades, the only sound that remains is the soft, distant, and lonely sound of the night wind, blowing over a kingdom, a castle, and a king who has, for a few precious hours, finally found his escape.